I'm Pastor Tom, and welcome to the Sunday Sermon.
You got to move, 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 child, you got to move, you got to move, 'cause when the Lord gets ready.
All right, I'm going to read to you from the book of Ecclesiastes, starting, it's what's called selected verses, starting in chapter 1, verse 16, and the last verse I'll end up reading is chapter 2, verse 25. I said to myself, behold, I have magnified and increased wisdom more than all who were over Jerusalem before me, and I've observed a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. I set my mind to know wisdom, to know madness and folly, and discovered that this was just a striving after wind, because it turns out in much wisdom there's much grief, and increasing knowledge means increasing pain. So I said, okay, let's try pleasure, see if that works. So enjoy yourself. It too was futile. I said, well, what of laughter? Well, that's just madness. What of pleasure? Well, what does it accomplish? So I decided to very judiciously see how I could, using alcohol, discover whether it is wise or futile. And all I saw was that there's not much good under the heavens. So I tried to enlarge my works. I built houses and planted vineyards and gardens and parks and planted trees and ponds to water forests. And I bought a lot of slaves, and I had huge flocks, more than anyone before me. And I had money, silver and gold and treasures, king's ransoms. And I provided myself entertainments, singers, and many pleasures, and I became great and increased more than all who preceded me in Jerusalem, and my wisdom was standing there the whole time, so that whenever I saw something, I did not refuse myself that thing. I didn't withhold any pleasure from my heart. If it pleased me, I had it, because I considered it my reward. But then, when I looked at it all, everything that I'd done, the labor, the things I'd worked so hard for, it was all vanity, striving after wind. There was no profit. So considering wisdom and madness and folly, well, what is it that someone will do after a king except what has already been done? So there is nothing better than this. Eat, drink, tell yourself your labor is good. This is what comes from God, from the hand of God. For who can eat, who can have any enjoyment without God? No idea when Ecclesiastes was written. One of the things with so these ancient texts have all kinds of different possibilities. One possibility is that it starts with something, and that gets passed on and added to over time. And so you'll have maybe a core that represents that original person, like maybe Solomon himself wrote something, but then more gets added to it, and it kind of expands out. We see an example of that, by the way, in the book of Isaiah. Because in the book of Isaiah, there's the first part is the words of the prophet recorded probably by his immediate students. But then one of the things that happens is that you end up with a school of Isaiah, if you can call it that, where a tradition around this particular prophet continues through his disciples and then those who follow in that line. And so at some point within that tradition, there was another prophet who then, if you're in the tradition, you do not speak on behalf of yourself, but on behalf of the tradition. So there's another section of Isaiah. It's actually sometimes called Deutero-Isaiah, but it's a different voice speaking, a different prophet. But a prophet within that tradition of Isaiah who then it doesn't feel comfortable claiming the voice for himself, or herself, but probably himself. And so just speaks in Isaiah's name, and it becomes part of this collection. So that could have happened with Ecclesiastes. Maybe Solomon started something and it was written down, and then as time went on, those who received it kept adding to it, and they didn't dare speak for themselves, even as they were coming up with more wisdom. They just added to it, and it let the voice of Solomon be the voice that spoke throughout. It's a little bit hard to tell, but there's some aspects in the book that suggest the timing. Like there are certain Persian loan words that pop up here and there, and the Persian language would not have been a language that you'd expect folks in Judea, in Jerusalem, to be exposed to prior to the Babylonian exile, which is 586 BC. And so there's this period of time that sort of a line that kind of marks, oh, we're starting to see Persian loanwords. This means that there's been this exposure to the Persian Empire. And then there's also a few Aramaic things and phrases in there. And the Aramaic, that also is that time period. So most of the time, most scholars, nobody tries to pin it down, right? Nobody goes, this is when it was written. They all kind of go somewhere between this and this. So there's somewhere between, say, 500 BC and maybe 200 BC as the latest, somewhere in there. We don't know. So I just thought I'd mention that because it's helpful to know these things. It's real easy to just sort of make declarative statements about the text because there's some tradition that developed centuries later about it, and then we just claim that. But this represents a lot of insight over time, a lot of thinking about the nature of life. And because Solomon himself was such a wealthy and famous person, known for his wisdom, known for his incredible wealth, he was very successful at being the king. And as a result, we get this very interesting observation about life happening. Either Solomon himself talking about his own life or someone speaking in the name of Solomon describes this thing and says, well, look, I've been humming along just fine, and I finally got to that midlife crisis place, and I'm like, well, what's the meaning of it all? So I started exploring that a little bit. If I get a red Corvette, will that make the difference? So I tried this different stuff, and he describes some of the different things that he tries. And always he talks about wisdom guiding me. So he's trying to be intentional about this, but he goes through a time. He says, well, what if I try this? What if I try possessions? Like I'll just, anything I can buy, everything, I'll try to get everything I can. And then he says, well, that doesn't work. And then he says, oh, I'll try pleasure. Just whatever feels good, I'll do that. Somehow that didn't work either. He tried great accomplishments. I'll just build stuff. That's what I'll do. I'll build great works. But then he's like, yeah, but then I'll die, and that's what happens to the works. Someone else can come along and break the thing. Right? There's a saying that I learned from Josh, our son Josh. He learned it from his teacher. His teacher said about choral music programs in high schools. His graduate school teacher said, it takes 7 years to build a choral music program and 7 weeks to destroy it. Mm-hmm. And so there's like I can build all of this stuff, but then how do I know that the next generation isn't going to mismanage it and the whole thing's going to fall apart? Kind of reminds me of what Benjamin Franklin says. Apparently they came out of the Constitutional Congress. They've been writing the Constitution. And somebody came out, Ben Franklin comes out, and this woman says to him, have you got us a new king? And he looks at her and he says, we have got you a republic if you can keep it. Right? Because there's that, like, how long will this last? Until someone comes along and breaks the thing, or until some circumstances arises and it no longer works and it all falls apart. What's the point? He tries wealth and possessions. He tries pleasure. He tries great works and accomplishments. He tries knowing a lot, wisdom. If I just know everything, that'll be good. Then I'll be wise and understanding. But have you ever tried to convince your young children or grandchildren that they should avoid certain things in life? that, no, don't do that. That's not healthy for you. Well, we know that because we've developed the wisdom to know that. Sometimes we learned it the hard way, right? But they can't believe us because what do they say? Wisdom is wasted on the young. And so if you have a lot of wisdom, there's a lot of pain because you know what's going to happen, but people are doing it anyway. You can actually see it coming. And sometimes you get dragged along in the wake, which makes it worse because you know what's coming. They're all surprised. How did this happen? We didn't know that's what was going to happen. And you're like, man, I saw this coming all the way. I'm trying to tell you guys. We thought you were being, exaggerating. Right? So wisdom, and so Solomon's looking at this stuff, or Koheleth, I'll use that term instead, the preacher in Ecclesiastes. He's looking at all this stuff, and he's going, none of this seems to make any sense. None of it seems to work. What's the point of it all? I know, I'll try drugs. Now, I need to tell you that he's very clear about how he describes this. I'm going to let my mind guide me as I carefully analyze the effect of alcohol. But what he's doing is, there are huge traditions in many religions involving the use of narcotics, of different kinds of drugs, as aids to spiritual development. This is not at all uncommon. So you have certain of the shamanistic religions use peyote, understanding that the careful use of the hallucinogen opens up possibilities. There are traditions that used hemp products to find that inner calm and that inner peace. Even things that you and I think about as normal, like beverages, tea, for example. I don't know if you know this, but the mythology around tea, there's a mythological story, a legend of the invention of tea that relates to a guy he goes by the name Bodhidharma. He was a Buddhist monk who went from India into China, and he supposedly went into a cave to meditate for 10 years, and because he was constantly falling asleep, this is actually how the story goes, he tears off his own eyelids and throws them, and out of the ground grows tea plants. That's why the tea leaf is shaped like eyelids. And, it's a little bit like how the loon got how loons got their rings. It's that kind of story. But the thing is, the tea was it was the caffeine and stuff in the tea that helped keep you awake, so you didn't fall asleep while you were meditating, right? So it's considered an aid to the religious skill. So this is very, very common. So that's the kind of thing he's talking about. He's not just talking about, I'll just get drunk and see what happens. He's actually looking at, does alcohol provide is it a tool to the development of the deeper self? And he finds out, work or not, it still doesn't really work. I mean, this stuff just keeps failing on him. And when you think about it, it's not necessarily because any of them by themselves is wrong or bad. It's something else, another problem. Did you ever notice how we have this idea that if you can just collect them all, right? Do you have collections of things? Like, get the full set. Do you have the full set? Right? Whatever it is, like Boyd's Bears or something, gotta have the full set. Ooh, can't wait till the new Hallmark Christmas ornaments come out. Gotta have the full set. I am very fond of a Japanese movies, a particular Japanese movie character. His name is Zatoichi, and so there were a number of films made about this character. I have the complete set, even the hard-to-get ones. By the way, that's 25 movies, right? 25 DVDs. I've got them all. That's got to have the complete set. Oh, yeah, you got to have them all. So we do that. We have the complete set. There's a certain amount of pleasure in having the complete set. But sometimes that thing, you're like, if I can just get the complete set, it's not. I've had this experience where to finish the set, there's the one you don't really care about. I suppose I should get it so I have the complete set. And you realize that completing the set is not that significant, doesn't really make that big a deal. If it's something you really like and having the complete set means you can go back to it later, that's cool. But so often completing the set doesn't have any impact. Not in the short run, not in the long run. Doesn't really make our lives better. It does clutter up space in our houses, and that's kind of it. And we look at things that with the idea, though, that if I can just finish the set or whatever we're pursuing, just one more. I just need this one. When I finally find this thing, whatever the perfect thing is, that'll be the one that everything will then make sense. What bit of wisdom or what bit of possession or what bit of something, that's going to be the thing. And I remember as a kid once there was a particular thing I wanted for Christmas. I was very excited about it. I'd seen it in the TV commercials Saturday morning while I was watching cartoons. I really wanted it badly. And I got it. I was so excited. And like within a day, it broke. And years later, I didn't care. Probably weeks later, I didn't care. I mean, there are any number of times when I've gotten a thing that I was just very excited about getting, and it turned out it really didn't matter. I didn't really care. It didn't make my life better. It didn't make me happier. It wasn't necessarily useful to me. And then at some point, it broke or was lost or got thrown away. And there's this piece in this story, which is part of why none of this stuff seems to do the job, is because even if it gives me that moment of satisfaction or pleasure or comfort or help or assistance, it's only in that moment. But then it's gone. It all fades. Everything fades away. Everything withers to dust, and the wind comes and blows it off. It seems to me there's a song about that, right? Dust in the wind or something. Everything is dust in the wind. I mean, it's like, well, I tried really hard to get this, and now it's falling apart. And there's that recognition that somehow the gift of happiness, the gift of satisfaction, the gift of contentment was not to be found there. And my problem is then I go looking for that one thing that's going to bring it, make it happen. What am I missing? What is the one thing I'm missing? What is the little bit more that I have to have until I'm finally satisfied? What does that look like? How do I get there? How do I make it real for me? What is the thing that lasts, that will never disappear, will never fade, will never fall apart, will never blow away? The thing that will finally make it worthwhile? So this is the question that the writer of Ecclesiastes is dealing with here. And he comes to this really interesting conclusion. He says, this is what I discovered. This is what contentment is about. It is about enjoying the labor that God has given you to do. It is about celebrating the food that God has given you to eat. It is about living in the moment God has given you to live. This moment, this food, this work, this place. And even if it is just going to disappear again, even if it's just vanity of vanities, even if it just blows away, in this moment, it is a gift. And it is a gift and because you couldn't even enjoy it if God wasn't giving it to you. And when he says that, he's acknowledging something very, very important, which is all of these temporary gifts, all these things we have just for the moment, come from the one who is not just for the moment. And so the call to be in that place, this place now, here and now, and to say, no, this is good. This is the place that is a gift. This moment is the place that it's okay to say thanks for. There's an old hymn. It is not in our hymnal. It's that old. But it goes like this. It says, we plow the fields, we scatter the good seed on the ground, but it is fed and watered by God's almighty hand, who sends the snows in winter, the warmth to swell the grain, the breezes and the sunshine and the soft caressing rain. All good gifts around us are sent from heaven above. So thank the Lord. Yes, thank the Lord for all this love. I don't know if you know who Joseph Heller is. He was an author. He wrote a book called Catch-22. That one you probably have heard of, Catch-22. Very, very famous book, sold a lot of copies, and I think it was published in 1961. He was a friend of another famous author, a guy named Kurt Vonnegut Jr. Now, I love sci-fi, so I've read tons of sci-fi. So you say the name Kurt Vonnegut Jr., I just go, Slaughterhouse-Five, because that's the only title that will pop into my head. I've read more than just that, but that's the only one that will just pop into my head. But these are two pretty famous authors. And it just so happened, this is a story that Kurt Vonnegut Jr. told. And he was a little sparse on a couple of details, which I understand. But the story was this. He and Joseph Heller, apparently they were friends, they had been invited to a soiree at the fancy mansion of a very, very wealthy person. Rich. And so there they are, a couple of just successful authors in this just a massive presence of wealth. And Vonnegut says to Heller, he goes, Joe, how does it feel to know that our host here made more money yesterday than you will ever make from your book, Catch-22? And Joseph Heller said, doesn't bother me at all, because I know something he doesn't know. Vonnegut said, what do you know that he doesn't know? And Heller answered, I know I have enough. Can you find the prayer of response? And please stand as we pray together. If only I had just a little more, then I would be happy. This is how I see my life. I need just a little more money, a bit more time, just one more success, one last insight. So, Lord, I go through life looking for that one more. Is this it? Is this the thing that will make the difference and finally let me be happy? But none of it can ever be enough because it cannot last. It is all a passing breath of vanity, perishable and temporal. So, Lord, if everything in life is as fleeting as a dream, then what can satisfy? Only this, to enjoy the blessings you have given me while they are mine to enjoy, to embrace the moment, live in the present, and see the value in my life's labors. And in the end, when all the things of this life have faded away, to cling to you, my eternal God. Amen. We'd love to have you join us for in-person worship Sunday morning at 8:30 at Christ United Methodist, or Sunday morning at 10:15 at Stanton United Methodist. And if Sunday morning is not your jam, join us Monday night, 6 o'clock at Christ United Methodist for Pizza Church. It's church, and then we eat pizza. Until next time, may the Lord God bless you and keep you. May the face of the Almighty be upon you, and may God grant you peace. Perfect peace. Oh, may God keep